everybody, Shemai Pawb. Welcome back to Imperial Probe, episode number 2, a new podcast on Wales in the movies. What we're going to be doing on this podcast is we shall be alternating in months between Welsh topics and international film topics. And today's podcast, I'm delighted to tell you, is about representation of women in Welsh films since 1995. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Ms. Kate McCormack. Kate, hello. Shemai.
Hello.
How you doing?
Nice to be here. Good, thank you.
Excellent. So me and Kate are sat in Penarth, and like I've mentioned to you, we're going to be talking about representation of women in Welsh films. But first, we're going to get to know Kate a little bit, because do we know each other?
A little bit, yeah. We know each other on Twitter and through having a few conversations about films, but not greatly. No, you won't know me from anything online or anything like that. I'm quite quiet.
Okay.
Online.
Well, don't be too quiet today, will you?
I'm not going to be. This is me now not being quiet.
Go for it. So as you can hear, Kate's a woman, and I'm a man, and I've got a little confession to make before we start. I'm white, and I'm British, and I'm a bloke. I'm also heterosexual. I've got a case of the not gays. I'm going to get that out there. Now, that status of mine, I believe, renders me at least a little bit sexist, at least a little bit homophobic, and probably a little bit racist as well, because I was raised in the 80s. What I'm trying to say with that is I don't have much of a handle on women's issues. Now, I'd like to know more, and I'd like to come at it from a position of more kind of questioning and humility, rather than telling women what it's like to be represented in a certain way.
That's pretty refreshing. It's a good start.
Well, it's just I'm just trying to be humble. So yeah, basically what I'm saying is I'm a little bit probably racist, sexist and homophobic because I'm a white British heterosexual male.
Well, we've all got our prejudices. Obviously, I've got mine as well. But I think it's good that anybody's talking, to be honest, about women's issues, particularly in film, because people generally don't. So, I'm not saying that I'm here to sit in for all women. Obviously, I'm not. I also have my own set of ways of looking at things. It's different to yours. Class-wise, I'm all over the map. Really.
Sure.
I've had bailiffs at my door, but obviously I speak quite well. I'm well educated. There's a good range of understanding there, and I think particularly with anything to do with with women, you have to think about being intersectional and all of those sort of words like that, and kind of taking everything into account, and we can't possibly do all of that in one go.
Sure.
We're just here to talk about these particular films, and I'm hopefully going to be able to give you a view that you're not quite used to.
Sounds good. Well, my only in to this topic, as I was kind of talking to you a little bit about before, is that I'm a Welsh person. So, and my status as a Welsh person is increasing by the week, I'd say, with the current British political and media climate.
I think you're not alone in that, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm basically what the media would call a Welsh nationalist, right? Yeah. So I'm happy with that term, as long as it's used consistently and fairly. The term feminism, you're hearing a lot in terms of media, and especially cinema these days, not always used as a positive.
It's often used as a stick to beat people with, and I want to say right from the off, I am definitely a feminist, always have been, always will be.
Okay.
But again, what people understand by that term can be very different. When I speak about being a feminist, I mean that I look at everything from that perspective in terms of what it means to me. And when you look at films, you go back right to the beginning of the days of Laura Mulvey and film theory, and talking about the male gaze, which is about how most films are seen from the perspective of heterosexual males. And, I don't know how long ago that was, 30, 40 years maybe, but it's still almost certainly the case in a large proportion of the films we see that they are from the male gaze. And the ones we're going to talk about today, even though there are lots of female perspectives, lots of female characters, the gaze is still quite male in the way that the whole world is constructed. And, again, I'm not talking for all women. I can't believe that it's still as prevalent as it is.
Sure.
It's 2018. Let's move on.
One of the interesting things I find about this as a male is we're just pondering recently, and I mean recently, in preparation for making this podcast, for example, how that subliminal, constant reception of characters, of archetypes, has formed my subconscious worldview, my insentient kind of worldview. And I mean, how I've looked at women my whole life has definitely been affected by the films I've seen.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, 100%. So as I'm thinking about this topic, and as I'm thinking about Wales more, and as I came into this this media, this channel, through thinking about Wales and how we've been represented and how that affects people's concept of Wales in and outside of the country. How the films I've seen, going back from Star Wars, to everything, have affected kind of the way I see the world and the way I see, particularly women. I'm reading a book called Wales on Screen, edited by Steve Blanford, which was the first book I ever read about the whole Wales in films subject back in 2009, I think I read it. So Steve, hello, if you're listening. Thanks for editing and writing that book. Now I'm going to quote a lady called Michelle Ryan, a film lecturer and academic. I've never met her. And you can tell me what you think about this following segment. She says, 30 years after the arrival of women's liberation on this island, and while apparently inhabiting a post-feminist period, it might seem an opportune moment to examine women's place in TV and film industries in Wales. How successful have we been at achieving equality both in front of and behind the cameras? As Claire Johnston has said, it is at the level of the image that the violence of sexism and capitalism has been experienced, and it is at the level of the image that we construct much of our personal identity, with film and TV offering us role models, heroes, heroines, idols and icons to people our dreams and fantasies and mirror the world back to us. It is also at the level of the image that we are seeing a feminist backlash.
Yeah, feminist backlash is again one of those sort of terms that you hear quite often, and I think, well, I'm sorry, where is it? I'm not seeing anything to have a backlash against, to be honest, because the vast majority of TV and films that we see, that the women in them are still exactly the same as they always were. They're naked, they're often dead, usually a combination of both. Obviously we're talking about a lot of comedies here today, so it's not so bad, and actually Wales is a bit more fortunate in some ways in the fact that we don't necessarily have this well-established way of making films, because there perhaps aren't so many bad habits to get out of. But even then, as we're kind of going chronologically through a few films here, you can see that there has been a progression, and that we are now getting some films that are the kind of films that I want to see and that I want to be made, and that I would actually be interested in being involved in making. So I'm not sure about. I don't see a backlash against feminism in Wales for sure. Where
were you born?
Good question. I was born in Oxfordshire.
Oh my God! Right, that's it.
Sorry.
Right.
I apologise. I think
thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you later.
But I grew up in the borderland sort of area. Grew up in Gloucestershire, borderland with Wales, that sort of area.
Sure.
So.
But of course, I'm fiddling around. Like, I knew from the first time we met that you obviously care about Wales.
I do.
And if you live in Wales,
exactly. I'm here now. I'm Welsh. Not. I wasn't born here, not
sure.
at all. But I am. I would say of the Welsh nation, and I'm really interested in seeing Wales make as much of itself as it has the potential to do, particularly in the creative industries.
Yeah. I think on that topic of you talking about the lack of backlash, and I'll go back to Michelle Ryan now with another quotation. I'll stop this, sorry listeners, in a moment, but I find this quote that I'm about to read you very comparable with devolution. And I'll try and cut the politics down as much as possible. Well, I won't really, but okay, here's what she asks Michelle. It says, has the impact of post-feminism so successfully muted women's anger and frustration that even when faced with an objective reality that is still not in their favour, they prefer not to appear too critical in case they are seen as uncool, anti-men, unfeminine or a threat?
Yeah, I do get that, definitely. That can happen. The idea that in order to get what you want and to sort of move on, you can't afford to be too obstreperous. You can't go against what's known and what's familiar. I can only speak for myself in terms of that. I've never been what you would call a yes person in any sense, and particularly not as a female.
Yeah.
I will always say if I find something disturbing. I've been a teacher and I've found it surprising sometimes what my students haven't picked up in films. They haven't seen the subtext against women, and they're not always aware of the kind of structural inequality that's built up over the years to kind of bring us to where we are today. And I don't want to say that young people don't know what we're talking about. That's stupid. A lot of younger women actually are making the best stuff now because they no longer care. They're just blitzing through it regardless, which is fantastic. But I think that it is a good moment for Wales and for women if we could only seize it properly.
As far as you're concerned, from your perspective, why is representation of women so important? As
you said, films are what people grow up with to kind of create their internal world. It's not necessarily how the world around them is, but it's how they interpret the wider world. And if it's not like we believe that everything we see on a screen is real, but we do internalise things. And if women are always victims or always the love interest, always sort of perfectly formed, wearing perfect dresses, then the reality is going to be hard for people to take. And when the reality actually pops up on screen, people often don't like it. And I've always found that absolutely tragic, because all of my favourite characters have always been real. That's the key thing to me, is the character real? And I don't mean that, it's a biopic or it's based on history. I just mean, does the character make sense internally? Do they do things that are based on their character rather than based on, well, when's she going to get her baps out, or when is she going to do something silly so that she can be saved? Because otherwise, that's what people grow up with thinking is actually how women should be.
Are there any female characters that stand out for you as favourites, or movies that stand out for you as favourites in that context?
It would have to be, I'm not alone in this, it would have to be Thelma and Louise, definitely.
Sure, okay.
There are problems with that film, but dear God, they got in a car, which is a great start. Frankly, I love a road movie anyway. They got in a car, for reasons based on just having had enough. And people have problems with the ending of Thelma and Louise. They don't win in the traditional way. But I really, really like the fact that they won in the fact that they did what they wanted to do. They were not told what to do by anybody the whole way through that film. And that's so unusual.
Ridley Scott, I got my issues with the guy personally, but I think it's pretty good for opportunities for women in main characters, right?
Can be, yeah.
Before we crack on with the topic of today, I've got an early shout out for a lady called Angela Graham. So I phoned Angela. She's a producer and writer, originally from Belfast, lives in Wales, and she gave me a bit of a pep talk on the phone before I recorded and wrote this, the outline for this pod. And I kind of realised, how much I need to be schooled when she was speaking to me, because, what she was saying was that, great, well done for doing this, but this topic is so broad, and you really cannot go too deep with it in an hour or so.
Absolutely.
So what I'm saying to the audience is that Kate and I today are going to be scratching the surface of this topic. And what I'm going to say to Kate is that this podcast, hopefully, is a literally free zone, and by that I mean that we don't like the use of the word literally. Now, I haven't heard Kate use it yet.
Oh, now you've put it in my head.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
But we're going to try. Even I'm falling prey to this now. It's like there's no other adverbs available to English language speakers. It's like everything's literally, man.
Yeah.
It winds me up. It's like, you don't have to say literally. I believe you. I believe that you're outside my door. You don't have to say I'm literally outside your door.
I'm literally recording this podcast trying not to say literally now.
Yeah. Well, you can say it if you want.
Yeah.
Don't think about rabbits. But you may ask, okay, so the audience may ask, so if they were listening and if they're interested, which I hope they are, why 1995? Is that like an arbitrary time? And my answer is to that, although you haven't asked it, I have, is that in 1995, well, if you were born then, for example, you'd now be 22 or 23. If you were born in 95. So you're coming into, your early stages of adulthood, and the films that have been around since that may be quite important to your images of women in Wales, if you've seen them. But also that in 1995 there was a film released by Miramax. Probably haven't got time for that subject.
No, let's not go there, because I will go on for hours and hours and hours. It won't be pretty.
Well, that's podcast number 2. But yeah, there was a film released by Miramax in 1995, in August 1995, in the UK, in Wales, and it was the first Hollywood, as you may want to call it, or American studio film set in Wales since The Corn is Green with Betty Davis in 1945. So this was a 50-year gap for Americans being shown Wales on their screens. In 1995, The Englishman Who Went Up a Hill But Came Down a Mountain. Great bit of marketing, whoever chose that name, because I already don't want to say it again, and I've said it once. But The Englishman Who Went Up a Hill But Came Down a Mountain was released in 1995, starring Hugh Grant. I'll briefly give a synopsis. I think it came on I suspect that the film was altered because it came a year after Four Weddings and a Funeral. So the marketing of the movie, I think, was focusing on the Hugh Grant aspect a lot. The synopsis of the film: two Middle English cartographers come to a southern Welsh village in order to measure its local and revered mountain, which is called Ffynnon Garw, to determine whether it is in fact a mountain at all. And when they realise that it's below 1,000 feet, I think.
That's right, yeah.
They decide that it is not a mountain, it is in fact a hill. And the local reverend, who's a fantastically amusing character played by Kenneth Griffith, sees the symbolism in this reduction of it from a mountain to a hill. And they go about keeping the cartographers in town so they can change it and reclassify it as a mountain.
Yeah.
Now, Kate, you have the floor. What's your opinion of the movie? And most importantly, let's talk about the female characters.
Well, actually, when you were just doing that synopsis there, I realised something that I'd never realised the 2 times I've had to watch this thing, which is actually how symbolic it is that they're trying to make this very pointy thing bigger. It's such a male thing, isn't it? My hill, oh my God, you can't call it a hill, it's got to be a mountain. Never actually occurred to me, but yes, so just
Nor me,
yeah,
excellent, yeah, good.
But also the fact that it's a very patriarchal film. It starts off with a voiceover from a granddad to a grandson, kind of ye olde Wales. This is one of our sort of mythical tales, and right at the beginning, I'm starting to think, oh God, do I have to sit through this? And yes, apparently I do. There are female characters in it. They're distinctly sidelined. They are there specifically to do what the male characters want them to do and to just move the plot along. The most notable is Tara Fitzgerald, who was, she was kind of an it girl of her time, not Welsh, doing a Welshish accent.
Betty from Cardiff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And doing a very kind of interesting class thing, actually, because she has to initially pretend to be Miss Elizabeth from Cardiff and be sort of posher than she is, as if she's not good enough. But obviously that kind of all falls apart because Hugh Grant's so lovely that he loves her as she is, and it's all a bit painful, to be honest.
And she's a prostitute, right?
Well, it's not entirely clear. It's all very kind of glossed over, but she certainly does appear to be a prostitute who gets a bit peeved off actually at being sort of pimped out to these Englishmen to kind of keep them busy while the Welsh guys make the hill bigger. It's a very bonnety film. It's kind of period, and there's lots of costume and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, from a Welsh perspective, it's in the same year as Braveheart and Michael Collins.
Yeah, that's not good, is it? The only thing that I can say in his favour there is that the Welsh character, the Welsh and the English characters are equally kind of lampooned and caricatured. Sure. The English characters are impossibly English. Hugh Grant doing his "I'm a foppish Englishman" sort of thing. Yeah. He's made to look as big of an idiot as the Welsh are. But maybe not quite as much, though, to be fair. Having said that.
Lisa Palfrey's in it, so she's in it briefly. She crops up in lots of Welsh films. She's a really good performer. But I don't think she even got a spoken line in the film.
She's got a few.
Yeah,
they're not worth speaking, really.
Sure.
No.
To me, what interests me, and we're going to talk about this for every film, is the emergence of patterns in these films that we're talking about. You mentioned it's a kind of almost a comedy, but it's got the kind of. For me, it's got multi-genres, and there's an unclear tone running through the thing. They try and set it after World War One and give it that pathos.
And there's actually quite a lot of kind of heavy stuff about PTSD and the amount of men that were killed in the war, which is a really kind of worthy subject to include. And I'm not saying that you can never be funny about such things, but they sit really awkwardly together. Yeah,
it's a continuing pattern that we could talk about in numerous podcasts. Well, I could that lots of these films today and other films that we're not going to explore. Have a confused tone and confused genres and confused tone, which I'm not quite sure where it comes from, but I've got a few theories. But in terms of Tara Fitzgerald, Betty from Cardiff, what's interesting, of course, is the accent sounds like it's from somewhere just south of Karachi. And
they often do wander there, don't they? The Welsh accents. That, shouldn't really have happened in the first place. Tara
Fitzgerald, she's not exactly and wasn't exactly a world star.
No.
So why not cast a Welsh actress and create a little Stardust of our own? I don't understand why. Yeah. It's not as if she was going to bring in the hordes of American audiences,
No, I think that's definitely something that we can kind of develop as we go through these films. The the fact of why is there not a Welsh actress in a Welsh role. I mean, it's a big subject. You kind of run into all sorts of problems with, well, okay, if we're saying that English and Australian and South African actresses can't be Welsh people, then what about, you know, Welsh people being English in films and stuff like that? Acting means pretending to be somebody else.
Yeah.
But as you say, I think when it's not a style vehicle, what's the point of that?
Yeah.
You know, she wasn't huge at the time. She certainly was popular, but she wasn't the kind of name that you'd sell a film on.
Sure. I mean, if you're going to get Sandra Bullock, okay, fair enough. You know, in 1995. But Tara Fitzgerald, is she going to put how many more bums on seats was she put in?
No.
I mean, even Zita might have been an option back in them days.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, final word on the film. What have you got to say about the women aspect, the female aspect? What's your reaction to it?
Oh, it's just one of those that I really just don't want to see again, for the amount of tweeness and for the women just acting as automatons to move the plot on and just not being real in any way, shape or form. Apart from, as I said, the class aspect is mildly interesting.
I mean, just to note, I mean, I really do think that the director Christopher Munger's got quite a bit of talent. There's loads of good aspects to the film. I love the soundtrack. I mean, I do like some of the direction and I like some of the writing in it. But yeah, and I think he's clearly a proud Welsh guy. But I think there are many issues with it. Between The Englishman, who went up a ridiculously long title that I can't be bothered ever saying again in my life, and Twin Town in 97, we had a film called Darklands. We're not going to talk about Darklands today, but that had, I think, one female character in it who was a femme fatale. Disgraceful movie, racist against the Welsh, self-loathing, horrible. In 1997, we then had Twin Town.
Yeah.
So, of course, Twin Town's probably the go-to reference for anyone in Welsh film. If you haven't seen it, which I can't believe you haven't, if you're listening to this, if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't seen Twin Town, that's really quite odd. But anyway, how can we? Twin Town is starring Reese Fans and his bro Lleyton Fans, and it's about two delinquent druggy brothers in Swansea who take revenge on a local kind of kingpin stroke gangster bully for not paying their father, Fatty Lewis, played by Hugh Caredig, insurance after a off-the-books industrial accident. Now, the thing about Twin Town that interests me is that I think it set the tone for a lot of films that followed it. In particular, it did something successfully, which few films have managed since, which is that what I think Kevin Allen did magnificently was cross genres.
Yeah.
So when that scene with the poodle happens,
yes,
the film
it darkens.
It darkens considerably. Now, I don't think it gets funnier as it goes on, because I've seen it so many times, but I've watched it a few times recently. As a thriller, it really gets better and better and better. A lot of the problems with the film are that there's expectation of Welsh films now based on Twin Town that they should be comedy. They have to be funny.
And kind of dark humour as well. Yeah. That it's kind of expected.
Dark and quirky Welsh.
Yeah.
Which is fine in one movie, especially when it works, but then when it's setting patterns, I think it became problematic. Now, women in the film, you got Rachel Scorgie.
Yeah.
Never seen her again, really.
No, I think she was in a couple of things. Because the film's 20 years old, the local paper did a kind of where are they now? Where is everybody in Twin Town now thing quite recently, actually.
Okay. And
they couldn't really find out what happened to her, which is a pity because I think she had absolutely great screen presence. She played the twin sister, Adie, and I just love every single moment she's on screen. So if you're out there, Rachel, come back, please. Yeah, come back. I mean,
it's a really good performance, totally believable. I mean, there is a kind of prostitute vibe going on as well.
Oh, there certainly is, but I think it's a subverted prostitute vibe, definitely, in that she works in a massage parlour.
Yeah.
But she says very clearly, I'm only the receptionist.
Yeah.
She does her prostituting on the side so that she gets to be in control of it.
Sure.
Which is, It's a small sort of point, but I think it's really important that everything the women do in this film actually is directed by themselves and sort of for themselves in a way. They kind of hoe their own row in what is it's a very male world, Twin Town.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of car chases, lots of drugs, lots of kind of male swearing, and lots of blokes in the pub. And the women don't kind of come out very well. They tend to get beaten up or die at the end of it. But they've had kind of a view of their own all the way through on how they want to go about things, which is, I think, important not to kind of lose that.
This is me questioning. I don't have firm opinions on that aspect of Twin Town. I mean, I'll be thinking about it a lot more in the future. I think my favourite line of the whole film, there's so many quotables, but it's not one of the famous ones, which is just when Greo says, I fucking liked her, Teddy.
Yeah.
And I just love it. That's just so Rhonda, like that.
Absolutely.
I liked her.
Yeah, I liked her. And this is a woman that, he's having sex with for money and, all sorts of problems there. But he really liked her, and it's a really, really sad little moment, actually. He really did like her.
He didn't love her.
Bless him, no.
He liked her.
But he means that he kind of loved her. He was on the way to loving her.
Sure.
She didn't love him back.
Yeah.
Her face while they're having sex is really interesting, actually, and it's really quite subtle.
Yeah, no, fair dues. It's a great show by Rachel there. You've got Di Botcher playing her mum.
Yeah.
She's in quite a lot of Welsh films.
Yeah, she's great. When they kind of come on screen together, when they're going to visit Fatty in the hospital, this kind of female presence suddenly just makes itself known in this very... They've been talking about models and, I don't know, fishing and funerals and boats and things, and then these two women sort of flapping, going, Fatty, and it's suddenly the female world arriving, and I love it. They just take over the screen and batter everyone else out of it.
Yeah, definitely so. Sue Roderick?
Yeah, I love her performance as well, actually, because she plays quite an interesting character in that she's a woman who is married to an absolute horror show of a bloke. Bryn Cartwright is a fantastic comic creation for a lot of the time, and then you see at the end that actually underneath it there's real steel. He's really unpleasant, and she's survived all this time married to this horrible man, and she manages to wind him up in a really great scene where he's playing scale extra, which I absolutely love. It's like playing with fire, but she does it quite sort of majestically and then wafts off. But later on in the film he punches her and his daughter, and it's you actually see that these men, they're not funny, they're not really funny. We all talk about Bryn Cartwright now because we all know one, I think, but you just kind of wonder, well, what are they doing when the door's closed? Funny but not.
You've got I think Susan, she's in Patagonia, and Heathwyn, very big part in Heathwyn, and loads of other Welsh films.
But she still gets asked about Twin Town more than anything else, apparently, which must get so wearing.
Well, I think William Thomas Bryn Cartwright lives within a stone's throw from where we're sitting, and so many times I've gone to approach him to say, but I'm just scared I'll call him Bryn, and he'll wind him up, but apparently he's a great guy. Like, I know Jenny Evans is another one. She's, I think, really good performance as his daughter, but I've never seen her since.
She's a journalist now, I believe.
Is that right?
Yeah,
okay.
I think she... I'm really surprised because, again, that character is really, really well done. She seems very sort of little girlish, daddy's girl. She wears her hair up in bunches and sort of does what he says, but actually at the same time she's rebelling by having sex with an older man and wanting to escape, and it's surprisingly subtle. It's
going to be very interesting to see the sequel. Because I know that
I'm scared.
I'm scared. I know that Kevin Allen has got at least one daughter, I think two, and that's almost certainly since he made this film.
Yeah.
So you can bet his perspective has changed. I do believe there's going to be significant female.
Well, I think they're the main characters.
I think so.
I think it's called Tin Town.
Tin Town, yeah. I think what he's, from the chats I've had with him, name dropping, I think what he's concerned about is that it's not going to end up like a Train Spotting 2 situation.
Yeah. Well, let's hope not.
Yeah, which, I don't understand why everyone loved that. I really had no time for it at all.
I didn't hate it, but
no,
I
didn't
love
hate
it either. And I have to say, I do love Twin Town. My family and I have been quoting lines from it for the last 20 years, and
I think it's a very bold, brave film.
Yeah.
Because to cross genres like that, and I think it's really ballsy filmmaking, pardon the expression.
When I said I was making this podcast, I mentioned some of the films that we're talking about to a friend, and one of the first things he said, it's so bleak. I was like, Twin Town, are we talking about the same film, really? Because I think it's, it's scatological and hilarious, and it is dark, but I would never say it was bleak. No,
it manages successfully to make it still funny and still dramatic and quite scary. So, final word on women in the... what do you take from it?
In Twin Town, I love them, and I hope that when Kevin Allen does make the sequel, he builds on what was actually quite a surprisingly good beginning in that film. Definitely.
I'll go with that. Okay, so next we're going to move on to 1999, I believe it was, a movie filmed about 90 seconds walk away from where we're sitting. It's called House. It's based on the decline of a bingo hall in another emerging pattern is going to start now. A fictional South Wales town or a fictional South Wales village. And it stars Kelly MacDonald, who was also in Trainspotting, the original, and in Trainspotting 2. And yeah, it's shot down the road. It's about a declining bingo hall, and it was funded, I believe, by the National Lottery back in them days. And I think a lot of the marketing of the film was kind of very lottery based. There was like, if you look at the posters for the film, there's like kind of lottery bingo balls.
All the kind of primary colours of the lottery sort of
same thing.
As well,
yeah, and it was also in the wake of a film called Waking Ned Devine in Ireland, which was about a lottery winner. So if you look at the posters for the two films, they're very similar. Before I give Kate the floor to talk about Kelly MacDonald and an actress whose name I can never pronounce, we got more patterns continuing. So we got quirky Wales. A Scottish and English actors portraying Welsh people. Yeah. We got a mixed genre. I don't really know what genre this film is. A very unclear tone, almost a little bit supernatural in a couple of scenes.
There's magical realism.
There's magical realism, a fictional South Wales village or town. Odd marketing of the film. But you mentioned something when we were talking before, which is about the Cinderella pattern.
Yeah, when I was looking at these films, actually, it's funny because at the time you see them the first time, you don't see them one after the other. But when I was researching for this podcast, I thought, wow, there's a lot of dead mothers here. There's a lot of dead mothers and kind of Cinderella complexes going on here. The kind of pretty but put upon young girl from somewhere, not very rich, not doing very well, and following her story through. And This one is a really good example of that, actually. Yeah. Okay,
so what do you think about Kelly MacDonald and the character in the movie?
Well, actually, I mean, this is one of the ones where I can almost see why Kelly MacDonald was cast rather than a Welsh actress.
Okay.
And it's a difficult area, and I don't want people kind of screaming at me that, you can never say that. But the director actually said that he was looking for a sweet 20-something who seemed like she could be from a small town in Wales but could also carry a film. She's the main character here. Mm-hmm. He needed a name that was known, but obviously wasn't too expensive because small budget, because it wasn't a big sort of Hollywood film. And
That's Julian Kemp, the director.
Yeah. And I could almost see what he was getting at there, because you think, well, who would have been around at the time? Who would have been able to do what he was after? And there probably were, there certainly were Welsh actresses who could have, but he wouldn't sort of know that. And in order to get a film made, you have to often have at least a bankable name.
How do you feel about the character?
It's a bit lame. She's very, very passive a lot of the time. She is very young, which kind of gives her a reason to sort of be like that. But the fixation on the sort of dead mother thing is a bit disturbing. She's still kind of got her dresses, and she even wears her dead mother's dresses, and she contrasts very much with her best friend in the movie, who's played by Mossy Smith, who's very kind of blousy, very sort of mature, what you might call a bit of a slapper, I think, is that that's kind of what she's going for. And the contrast between those two tropes of women is it just makes me sigh a bit. It's like you have to be one or the other. There is nothing in the middle. It's a known kind of groove to get into. Why do we have to kind of do that again? It's not realistic. No one's one or the other.
You've also got, I can never pronounce this lady's name, Miriam
Margolyes.
Margolyes. That's finally after 20 years.
Margolyes. I could be wrong, but that's how I pronounce it.
So she plays like the kind of evil aunt, is it?
Yeah, she's the aunt, but she's really the evil stepmother in the Cinderella story.
Yeah.
Essentially, she's kind of trying to kind of stir the pot and make things good for herself and putting upon our lovely little heroine sort of thing.
How's her Welsh accent like?
From memory, it's not too bad. I mean, Miriam Margolyes is a very, very uncategorisable actress anyway.
Sure.
She's
Blackadder, I'm thinking of.
Exactly. That's where everyone of a certain age, and I think we're
Wicked Child.
Age, yeah. It looks like a thingy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's odd in terms of being in films because of the way she looks. Because of the fact that she's not heterosexual. All these sorts of things make her very different. So, to be honest, I'm always glad when she pops up. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure why she's popped up in a Welsh film, but that's fine.
Final word on the representation of women in this. I mean, what do you think? Positive, negative?
It's not awful, but it could have been a lot better. You know, at the end of it, you know, our Cinderella does get what she wants, but she also has to kind of get the guy, and I just think that...
Jason Hughes.
Yeah. I've got nothing against Jason Hughes, by the way. I actually quite fancy him, but I think that's a bit niche. I'm not sure everyone else does.
Is that from This Life, is it?
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of women would think, oh, you know, he's lovely.
Kate's reaction to the summarisation of representation of women in Welsh films. Not awful.
Yeah. Yeah, that covers it. Yeah.
Moving on now to the next film, and before we do so, I'm going to go back to film lecturer Michelle Ryan in a minute from the book Wales on Screen. Quote, "We are seeing a more encouraging development with women filmmakers in Wales who have been able to resist the demands of TV and to concentrate on filmmaking. Women like Sarah Sugarman, Catherine Clark, Margaret Constantus, Philippa Cousins, Karen Rees, Jane Hubbard, Joanne Quinn, Catherine Lindstrom. From the artistic to the commercial, they are producing films that bring a woman's perspective to film and offer something different to the young male rites of passage films that seem to dominate the circuit." Now, I've heard of one of those people.
When did she write that? Do you know?
The book was published in 2000, so it would have been probably mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
So this is my segue into Very Annie Mary,
Yeah.
written and directed by Sarah Sugarman, released in 2000. So yeah, out of those lists of, I think, 9 women who were kind of touted as promising new filmmakers, as someone who's been researching Welsh films for 5 years, I've only heard of one of them.
Yeah, and as someone that is really interested in female writers and directors, I've only heard of one of them. Like, you know, one of them kind of half rings a bell, but I couldn't say where from.
No, that's not obviously
it's
no disrespect.
horrifying.
No disrespect is meant.
No.
I'm sure they're
it
very
might just
talented
be that I've
people.
never come across them, but I think if I don't know, there are lots of other people who also don't know, and that's
Sure.
When it's being sort of said that there's a kind of revival. I wish that were true, but I haven't seen it, I'm sad to say.
I'm seeing it in terms of movies set in Wales. As I said, you know, between 1945 and 1995, there was basically none. I mean, there were a couple of British ones. Let's not go there. But yeah, I think it's definitely increasing. But so, you know, part of that kind of mini revival and part of it's maybe prologue are films such as Very Annie Mary. So this is a movie that I'm confused to talk about it because it's got so much potential and so many good things to it, yet it is a big, I think, example of the missed opportunity in Welsh films. Now, Sarah Sugarman's clearly an incredibly talented woman. I really enjoyed Vinyl that she made recently. Doesn't have much female lib in it or representation, but I enjoyed it a lot. I guess hardly any people have seen that because it's Welsh and very other reasons. But so Very Annie Mary is about a young girl in fictional South Wales village. I don't know why we can't set these films in real places.
Let's get out of the valleys, for goodness sake.
Well, how about a real place? Like, I mean, for a start, everyone in that place is then going to go and see it.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, you're guaranteed getting...
Here, you know.
And it's incredible. So, yeah, fictional South Wales village. She plays a put-upon, clumsy young female character who's living with her father, played by Jonathan Pryce. And I believe the thrust of the film is that she needs to find her singing voice again.
Yeah, she's lost her singing voice.
Although
as we do. I
can't really tell you that is a theme that's running strongly through the narrative.
I only got that, I think, on the second time round. To be honest. I sort of missed it.
She also wants a house and a boyfriend, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, I'll just kind of give Kate the floor a minute, but the opening scene of this movie, right, is absolutely belting. So the film opens in, you know, the mountains, basically, in the valleys, and you've got, it's a beautiful sunny day, and you've got Puccini's, you know, Nessun Dorma being played out of this bread van. And I was watching this thinking, wow, I'm really into this. This is going to be a great film. How have I never heard of this before, you know? And then I realised that the film's called Very Annie Mary.
Where is she?
Now, it opens with her dad, who's supposed to be the antagonist, who you really is supposed to hate. And within 30 seconds, he's a very likeable and probably the only really likeable character in the film. And I think it kind of proceeds from that false start, you know. I mean, I don't know what the title really means. Very Annie Mary, it's... Who knows from that title what genre this film is, for example.
Yeah.
But then, opening scene is terrific. Unfortunately, it completely doesn't serve the film whatsoever because it's not about the father of the film.
Yeah.
And yet, so then the father has a stroke, and then Annie Mary has to look after him, right?
Yeah.
So, Kate, opinion, synopsis, what do you think?
This is one that I have difficulty with this as well. I have to say actually that it's a film that repays more than one watching. I liked it very much better the second time I watched it than the first time, because I was just very confused the first time I watched it. I really couldn't quite work out what I was supposed to be kind of looking for, if you know what I mean. What sort of genre is it? Who's the main character? What's her journey? I absolutely love Rachel Griffiths' physical comedy. She's really fantastic at pratfalls, of which she does a lot, but there's something about that kind of clumsy woman that I'm not keen on, because it's often kind of used as a way to kind of denigrate the character. Oh, look at her, she's such a klutz kind of thing, and that bothered me the first time. It bothered me less the second time I saw it.
I've got to admit, I haven't watched it a second time. I've often planned to, because I suspected I would have the similar...
Yeah, I really think it's worth watching a second time.
It's got some great stuff in it.
It's got some fantastic and really, really genuinely funny stuff as well. I really did laugh.
Yeah.
A lot, both times,
So it's also got the emerging patterns again. So you've got an Australian actress who no one's heard of, so I don't understand.
No, at that point, I mean, obviously she's gone on to do a lot, but at that point, I don't think anyone had any idea who she was.
Mixed genres, fictional South Wales village, unclear tone, unclear main character.
Yeah.
Any Cinderella issues here, we think?
Yeah, she's got a dead mother. Mother's dead. She wears a dead mother's dresses. I think we've heard that before. Yeah. And I'm not sure why that needed to be such a big deal, other than to kind of play up the relationship between her and her father, which again, on second viewing, is more subtle than I thought it was the first time. They're kind of codependent, actually. He is god-awful. Yeah. But she loves him and he loves her as well.
So you've got Jonathan Pryce, who's able to portray a Welshman being Welsh, so that's pretty good.
Does an excellent job.
Yeah.
Rachel Griffiths' accent is...
Yeah. I don't understand, man.
If I were to marry, he'd be him. Him or Mickey Mouse.
Of course, I mean, the issue is as well that there are people from the south of Wales who don't sound like they're from the Valleys or Swansea.
Yeah.
Like, you'll never hear a Cardiff or a Newport accent,
No.
apart from... We'll go there in a little bit, because in this film you've also got Joanna Page.
Yes.
Who, now I won't watch the TV show because I can't stand that Corden fella. But
that's understandable.
I'm sorry, I can't go there. But Joanna Page from Gavin and Stacey's in this film. Now, Ruth Jones is about the only person I've ever seen to actually genuinely portray Cardiff or kind of Vale of Glamorgan accent without trying to make it sound like she's from the Rhondda or Swansea.
I think it's just because that's the easy accent to kind of catch on to, isn't it? It's easier for an English or Australian person to get their kind of vowels round it. Yeah. I mean, you try doing a Mid Wales accent if you're not from there, and even
especially from Australia.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nightmare.
Yeah. So you've got Ruth Maddock as well. So from our generation, that's Heidi Hyde.
Absolutely. Yeah. And can I just say, Ruth Maddock in this film, so pretty. She's kind of playing the wicked stepmother, but I'm like, oh, so pretty. Ridiculous thing to say about a woman of her age, but it really.
I was doing some screenshots of this yesterday to prepare for the podcast. I thought, wow, Ruth Maddock looks really gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
Yeah. I'm only 39, but
yeah. She's an assassin in a twin set.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so final word about what do you think about the film, about the women in it?
Oh, I feel like I haven't kind of said any of the things about it that you really kind of should say about it. In that there is a definite journey here. Annie Mary does get the house and things at the end of it. Talking about Joanna Page, actually, that's a very kind of subtle performance as the kind of wise, sick girl. She's a bit like Beth from Little Women, which could have been awfully cloying but wasn't. So there are good things, but I really wish the world that the director was trying to portray in the first place had been a little less quirky. If the quirk was dialed down, the other things would have...
It's, I think, a need to be kind of touch on that Irish aspect of we're so quirky and happy.
We're so quirky, we're so Celtic, we're so funny.
We're not like...
No, we're just like everybody else. There are those of us that are those things, but not the entire village.
Sure. In many Welsh films, whether they be women focused or not, are seriously needing focus in terms of main character genres. Next, we're going to talk about a film which you almost certainly haven't seen. It was made in 2002 and it didn't get released because I believe the studio, which could have been Miramax, I can't remember, was being sued as a result of the movie Fahrenheit 9/11. and Fahrenheit 9/11. Sorry, Michael Moore's documentary about George W. Bush.
Right, yeah.
And one movie had to be scrapped from its marketing and release that year, and it was Plots with a View.
So they
Sacrificed this one, this is incredible because it's set in, would you believe it, a fictional South Wales village called Rotting Powys. However, it has in it Alfred Molina, Brenda Blethyn, Naomi Watts, Christopher effin Walken is in this film.
Oh, don't forget Lee Evans.
Lee Evans.
They had forgotten Lee Evans, but yeah.
Christopher Walken's in this film, Kate.
Yeah, he is.
And
he's right there with big, huge hair.
It's unbelievable, and no one has heard of it, and it's never been released in the United Kingdom.
My mother-in-law has heard of it.
Is that right?
Yeah, I was absolutely astonished. My mother-in-law has seen this film. Yeah.
So, I mean, basically, if I hadn't been researching like a complete obsessive loony, I'd never have heard of this. And now, what we're getting also is a common feature in Welsh films is that they have titles that do not translate to any genre, that do not make any sense, and that need to have their names changed in the USA.
God, and actually have a different title in every country they're in.
Well, this one is called Plots with a View in Britain, and internationally it's called Undertaking Betty.
Neither of which are good.
Now, I don't know how anyone's supposed to grasp what these films are about by those titles, but anyway, the synopsis is that there's an undertaker in a fictional South Wales village who's in love with a woman played by Brenda Blethyn, who's married to a corrupt and philandering politician played by a very good Welsh actor, Bob Pugh, who's having an affair with Naomi Watts's don't get me started on the scene when they're in the caravan. I'm like, that must have been, no offence, Bob, but she's good acting by Naomi Watts anyway. But so Naomi Watts spends most of the film in lingerie, short skirts, and high heels. What we've got to say about it, Kate? Brenda Blethyn, Naomi Watts. Yeah,
I mean, again, we've got that kind of contrast of the two, sort of tired tropes of women. Brenda Blethyn is, she's the good wife. She kind of wears lots of nice pastel colours. She's very passive. She doesn't stand up for herself. She's lovely to a horrendous husband and a horrendous mother-in-law who dies, actually. In this one, it's the mother-in-law who dies, not the actual mother, but she's still a kind of Cinderella-y sort of character. And then, as you said, Naomi Watts, all tits and teeth, and I mean, she does it very well. You can tell she was enjoying herself hugely.
Her accent's not bad, is it?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, it is pretty good. But
Miriam Margolyes is in it as well, is she?
Yeah, Miriam Margolyes.
She's in it twice.
She's twins.
There's another
in the flower shop.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know how you managed to sum it up so well, because it's an amazingly strange film.
Again, genres.
It's got about. You can't categorise it. Where on earth would you put that? I don't know. And there's.
Dark comedy, horror, romance.
Yeah, lots of kind of sort of prop stuff. And I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to talk about the film as a whole, but the female characters in it, again, they're not very realistic. They're types rather than real women, and it kind of meanders on quite amiably towards the end. And we get a wedding dress at the end, and you just. I don't know, again, it could have been so much more enjoyable than it was. And actually, I think it's interesting to say about this one that it is sort of set in Wales, but there's no reason at all for it to be here. Brenda Blethyn, and there's a DVD extras thing, she actually says that it was originally set in America, but she suggested it be set in Wales, so they moved it here. Right, just like that. Of course they did.
Well, I'm all for that personally.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's no specific. I mean, unless you've got unless a setting does form part of the message, then. But we need films that are just set here.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's actually really, really important to say that we don't have to signpost.
Sure.
The Welshness of everything, and it is also really good to see some films where there are no sheep.
Yeah.
There is no meandering valley shot. There are some on this list that are really badly guilty of that. But there are also some.
It is kind of small village quirky, though, isn't it?
It is. Oh, it is definitely.
It's also got that thing where at the beginning, I mean, the only DVD I could get of this was from Germany.
Yeah.
As you've probably seen, because I lent it to you.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, there's text legend on the screen which entirely has to define Wales as being next to England.
Yeah.
Now this happens in about 5 different films, including Submarine that we're going to talk about later. It's like this is a small country next to England.
Next to England.
And it's just
all
like
we can find to say, is it?
Oh my goodness. So the same problems emerging. Confused genres, quirky Wales, unclear tone, unclear main characters,
dodgy accents. The women are not very real.
Slight Cinderella complexes going on. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to 2007, we had a film which, believe it or not, has got 2 different titles. Here we go, more emerging patterns. This one's called The Baker, and in the United States and internationally it's called Assassin in Love. Because not only is he a baker, he's also an assassin.
I prefer The Baker as a title to Assassin in Love.
Sure, certainly. So unfortunately with this film, it's written and directed by Gareth Lewis, who's the brother of its star, Damian Lewis, who wasn't a star then but now is. Problem with this movie is that it's trying to do what 2 films did previous to it, which were both really good, which was Grosse Pointe Blank with John Cusack, which plays an assassin having existential crisis, and also The Matador with Pierce Brosnan, I think in about 2006, which was again a hitman having an existential crisis. Both of which managed to cross their genres and focus their tone quite successfully. So this film, you've got a London-based assassin. He moves to, and I quote, the country. The country is, of course, Wales, our nation, that he moves to. And he moves to a quirky, fictional South Wales village.
With a pub called the
Daffodil. And sheep, and hides out in a bakery, baking cakes and loaves and his hitmanness comes back to haunt him and his new squeeze, played by Kate Ashfield. Yeah. That's it. Kate, what you got to say?
I quite like this film actually. It's quite simple. Grosse Pointe Blank is obviously a much sort of bigger film in terms of its kind of scope for character development, and it's a really great film. This is not kind of trying to be such a kind of psychologically based one. There's nothing awfully wrong with it if you kind of avoid the problems with the Welshness or not thereof.
Yeah.
The character of Rhiannon, she's called Rhiannon, Kate Ashfield's character, but she's in no way Welsh that I can see.
It's never good when you can't remember a character's name and I can't.
No. But she's not attempting an accent, which actually I think is probably a better idea.
Sure. Well, loads of us haven't got accents here.
Exactly. No, I mean most of my family haven't.
No.
And, they've lived here all their lives. So yeah. I don't know, and I do think as well that I've been on stage doing a Manchester accent, for example, but I wasn't in Manchester while I was doing it. I would never do that, because that would just be embarrassing. I was in the Midlands where no one's Manchester accent was any better than mine.
I would just have to go Gallagher, I think. Yeah. That's all I could do.
Yeah, just stick on a monobrow and...
Mad for it, fucking right, just... Yeah, okay.
So, but, the idea of kind of being in a film with Welsh people, doing a Welsh accent at them, I just don't know how people have the stones.
Sure.
I really don't.
Fair enough. I mean, I found it a pretty bad film, to be honest. All the best intentions, but she's totally unforgettable, totally unmemorable.
Well...
Do you find?
I would agree with you actually to a certain extent, but I think the reason why I like it is because she is slightly unmemorable. She wears a jumper and wellies.
Sure.
She's very practical. She's not a glamour girl at all.
But she's also in the film purely as a...
Oh, she's purely there and actually that's set up right from the beginning. Right at the beginning, he's doing a video for a dating agency, and he says that he's looking for a woman to make a fresh start. So that's clearly all she represents right from the beginning, and I wouldn't disagree with that. But I do like the fact that she is almost a kind of realistic person.
What do you think about that? What do you think about that little wee scene with the 2 old ladies speaking Welsh?
The lewd, when they're being really lewd.
Yeah, you can catch it on Wales in the Movies channel. Everyone look at the Baker Welsh language scene. It's uploaded onto the channel.
I honestly don't know what to say about that. What do you think?
This is my perspective.
Yeah, go on.
I mean, from a male, I would have thought that would have been quite welcome from a feminist perspective, because they're being quite naughty, they're being proactive, they're talking about Damian Lewis's buttocks and how nice his buttocks are, as men would talk about women, which I personally think is fine as long as it's both and it's in moderation. So you can talk about women being attractive or beautiful as long as you're prepared to like them to talk about.
It's the objectification, isn't it?
Sure.
Yeah. And I see what you mean, but there's kind of also the fact that because they're speaking in Welsh and because they're old ladies in headscarves, it's made kind of funny.
Yeah.
They're not attractive girls doing it. They're the older kind of generation, and it's a bit sort of nudge, wink, wink. Where how's your father, and that, I don't know, that sort of makes me slightly uncomfortable. I'm not quite sure why, to be honest.
I'm not telling, I'm asking, because I'm a bloke and I don't speak Welsh either, much, or don't use Welsh much as I'm a full supporter. But yeah, I was just happy to see a Welsh language scene.
Yeah,
even though
it's nice to see people actually also kind of using it to literally speak their own language.
Sure, even though it's set in the country.
Yeah. They don't want him to know what they're saying.
Sure.
Which I like that idea. You know, women say things all the time, but they don't want men to know what they're saying.
Oh yeah. Right, we're going to crack on with The Edge of Love. Now, this one, I could talk for hours about this. I hopefully will do in later podcasts with on a Dylan Thomas one that we're going to be doing. But the reason for this film to exist is that these two women both had relationships with Dylan Thomas. Allegedly. Caitlin,
one of them definitely.
Caitlin McNamara and Vera Phillips. And the film is more or less about a period in Dylan Thomas's life when he was living in London making propaganda films for, I guess, what was the Crown Film Unit back then. And when the four people could kind of meet in London, which is Dylan Thomas, played by Matthew Rhys, Vera Phillips, played by Keira Knightley, Caitlin McNamara, played by Sienna Miller, and then Cillian Murphy's character, William Killick, who ends up marrying
Vera Phillips.
Yeah. Now, go for it.
You know from the beginning that this film is going to be about how things look. You know, Sienna Miller and Keira Knightley are on the cover. They're on all the posters. I would say that it's not really about Dylan Thomas. It's definitely not a biopic. It's an imagined.
And how distracting is that? I found that a massive distraction.
Yeah, I think because so much is known about Dylan Thomas, I think people find that incredibly distracting. But I also don't dislike it because I don't think that you have to necessarily stick to just playing things entirely straight.
Sure.
Dylan's the famous one, so we're going to make it about him. I think actually that was possibly because this is one of the ones that was written by a woman. It was written by Keira Knightley's mother.
Is that Sharman McDonald, yes.
Keira
Knightley's mum, really?
She's her mother.
Wow,
yeah, she's
okay.
A playwright. So I think, the idea was that we take the focus off this incredibly famous bloke and put it onto these less famous women who were in his life somewhere.
Now, in premise, that's a very hard thing to pull off.
It's hard to pull off, and I don't think it manages it. Partly because of the casting and the way it's filmed. The camera. This is very much about the male gaze. This film, that the camera kind of lingers on body parts. There's a lot of lips, there's a lot of eyes, there's a lot of kind of lingeringness over the way the camera kind of looks at the women. And the guy that's Vera Phillips, Keira Knightley's character, ends up marrying. He's a stalker. He's totally a stalker. Right from the beginning, he's watching her. He's overbearing. He kind of bullies her almost into being with him, and it's. Given that I think it was supposed to be, a kind of a feminist-focused film, I think it fails on many levels.
I enjoyed both their performances. Now, I think Sienna Miller's kind of reputation is going up in the kind of lovey world of stuffy criticism.
Yeah, she's been in a couple of really good movies since where she's been surprising, I think.
But sometimes in this film, I thought she was Welsh, and sometimes she's not Welsh. It's very odd. But is she supposed to be?
She's supposed to be Irish. I think most people feel that she's miscast.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly people that know what Dylan Thomas's wife looked like. She looked nothing like Sienna Miller. She was a big woman, and Sienna Miller is waifish and wispish, and she does a good job of kind of being feisty, I think, or maybe sort of at least being attractively feisty without it appearing kind of too unattractive, which I think is what the reality was like. Dylan Thomas and Caitlin McNamara were, like bulls butting heads a lot of the time, I think, and you really don't get that sense from this. But again, that's not necessarily a problem if you're not kind of going for absolute historical veracity.
So talking of history, Michelle Ryan says, prior to the 1980s, it was pretty difficult to associate women with film in Wales. Not so much hidden from history as absent. Even the films made in Wales or about Wales often used English, Irish or American actresses to portray Welsh women. Taking into account that quote, this film has some good intentions and some not so good. So
because I think you could have used Welsh actresses here, but obviously, you know, the film was kind of sold on the glamorousness of it. They were both kind of it girls at the time. You know, there's the bath scene.
Yeah.
And actually, there are three. Weirdly, there are three double bath scenes in these films.
Is that right?
The twins in Twin Town. Yeah. And then there's one later on that we'll come to, and Sienna Miller and Keira Knightley in the bath together in this one. Yeah,
sure.
And but one of the things I do like actually is that bath scene does not turn out to be what every man watching it probably wanted it to be.
I'll be lying to you if I said it didn't come through my head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
I think that was quite sort of well played to just draw back from that. There's a lot of kind of girlish giggling and a kind of a hint of sapphicness, but
a lot of smoking in this film.
Far too much smoking. That is basically the codifier for we're so bohemian.
Yeah.
We've got a fag on.
Yeah.
We're bohemian.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to now move forward to 2010, a couple of years later, and a film, Resistance. So this is another kind of example of a writer perhaps having a lot of influence on the film, based on the book by Owen Shears. Watching the trailer before I saw the film, I got a bit excited, and I was like, this is going to be an espionage, World War II, action-filled, tense thriller. Whereas in reality, it turns out to be 90 minutes of people whispering to each other on farms.
Trying to speak over the wind.
It's just like this. What's good?
I don't know what I say.
Honestly. So you've got Andrea Riseborough, Sharon Morgan, who I love. Now, I think Sharon's a great performer, loads of gravitas. She's in the next film and the last film we're going to talk about.
I think she steals this one,
yeah,
personally, for me.
She's certainly what I got attracted to in it. Kimberly Nixon, Melanie Walters. But, I mean, how do you feel about this one? You've watched it recently, right?
Yeah, again, it's the...
Because it should be about the women, this film.
It should be about the women, in that it's, you know, it's set in the Second World War when the men are gone from the village. In terms of the plot, it's actually really interesting. We won't kind of go into that too much here, but it's a counterfactual narrative where, you know, the Germans have won the war, essentially. So that's interesting in itself, but it feels like it's supposed to be about Andrea Riseborough's character, but she just wanders around looking ill a lot of the time.
And
whispering, not looking at all Welsh.
Yeah.
She does sound Welsh, but again, very much not the right part of Wales. This is kind of mid-borderland area.
You wouldn't actually know from the film that it was in Wales, apart from, I think, the town name is written up on a marquee somewhere.
There's nothing kind of... It's culturally not Welsh.
An American wouldn't know that this was anything other than England somewhere.
No.
Yeah.
Artistically, it's nice. It's beautiful to look at.
It certainly is. Yeah. Again, it's got great potential and great elements.
Yeah, but it just doesn't come off properly. Sharon Morgan's character, I think, she's more realistic in that she wants to kind of collaborate rather than resist, and that there's the kind of tension of that. But I don't know. Kimberly Nixon is in it for a few seconds, I think, weirdly, as just a kind of pretty face that the German captain then discourages his men from perving over, which is a very interesting moment, because he asks them, have you got sisters, have you got mothers? He personalises that kind of way of looking at women as, actually, do you know what, there's something wrong with that. She is someone's sister, she is someone's daughter, she's someone's, aunt perhaps, and it just makes you think that is a very interesting moment, but it's just kind of shoehorned in amongst lots more whispering and wandering about the valley. But
I quite enjoyed that whole humanising of the Germans' elements in Resistance.
Definitely, and I think weirdly, this was kind of set out. It sets out to be a film from a female kind of perspective, but I ended up actually kind of empathising with the German captain a lot more. He felt more real and just more sort of fleshed out.
The reason that, you mentioned Sharon Morgan, the reason why I got hold of her character much more than any of the others is for that collaboration. So there was tangible kind of development in that.
Definitely.
Identifiable characteristic. Yeah. The others, I just couldn't, they were whispering and I couldn't work out what was going on.
Whispering and wandering.
It was very, very odd. Yeah. So to finish up, the last film we're going to talk about now, I've got lots of nice things to say about this one, which is great. Now I wouldn't
like to fight with you about this film, but I would if I had to.
Okay. I don't know what you're going to say about it, but we're going to talk about LLYFRGELL, which in English is called The Library Suicides. Now, this was written by Flea David, who's a novelist, a musician, and now an upcoming screenwriter. Directed by Euros Lyn, who's directed Sherlock on TV, Doctor Who, Daredevil, Casualty, and loads of stuff for the BBC. However, this is his first move, I believe, into feature films. The synopsis is Elena Udick, played by Sharon Morgan, who we just talked about, commits suicide, or seemingly commits suicide, and she's a local celebrity author. And her 2 twin daughters, who work in a real place, Aberystwyth, in the National Library. Lesson there, everybody. A real, identifiable Welsh location. And her twin daughters work in the library, and they hatch a plan to get revenge on the people or persons who they believe to have wronged her mum. And it's all set inside mostly the National Library of Wales in Aberystwyth, and it's got a firm genre as far as I can see. It's kind of like a mystery thriller, murder mystery thriller, you might call it.
Sort of, yeah.
Okay.
I think there's more to the genre than that, because it's not a plodding kind of, you know, procedural murder mystery thriller. There's a definite weirdness about it, which I love, and the setting definitely adds so much to this film. You know, you could set it somewhere else, but it wouldn't have the gravitas it does of actually kind of really being filmed in the National Library of Wales. And the whole kind of the kind of breezy clearness of Aberystwyth really just comes through, I think.
I'm going to ask you about the female characters, because when I watched this in the cinema in Chapter, I was looking at the screen, and I'm not just saying this to big her up, I was looking at the screen, I had never seen her before or since, thinking, is that 2 actresses?
Yeah.
Or is it the same actress playing both roles?
Yeah.
But that's a big credit to the director there, because he has elicited, as far as I'm concerned, 2 fantastically subtle performances from Catherine here. But what do you think?
And timed really well as well. At the beginning, it's difficult to tell them apart.
Yeah. And
it's meant to be, you know, because twins have that kind of strange oneness. But as the film goes on and as they kind of change, owing to events, that you can tell them apart much better as it goes on. And I would agree. I think it's an absolutely stonking performance there. It really is. It's stylish, but it's not stylized, which is a hard thing to pull off. Yeah. I think.
I mean, my main problem with the film is that for me it looks like television. That's just my interpretation. I'm not a huge person for cinematography, I've got to say. So but I find that British films, and I will use that term in this case, that I find it can be rare that they're genuinely cinematic. I find that most British films, if they're set in present day, struggle for that. Most British films that are really cinematic for me are period setting.
Yeah, I think that's a problem with films in general, though.
What have you got to say about the characters and the female representation in the film? What do you have to say about that?
Well, as I said, the stylishness is actually, it's important. You know, the sisters wear a red shirt when they're kind of going on their would-be murderous spree. That's obviously a signifier for that kind of being powerful and coming forward, and also it really screams off the screen at you if you're in a library, obviously, which is kind of full of quite beige looking books and things. You know, she's really right there in both roles in a red shirt, and it's important that you know that she's in charge here, which actually I think you do from the beginning, because it starts off with it sounds very odd to say, but a very competent walking. She's walking very competently and very kind of sensible court shoes and making quite a noise about it. She's actually she's taking up space, and women in films often don't do that. You know, they don't kind of fill the screen with noise. They're often just there to look at, and she's competent.
The novel's set in the future, I believe.
It is. I think it's set kind of slightly in the future, not unrecognisable, but still the future. And I think that's not quite visible in the films. There are certain things that I think we certainly miss.
Do you think it's a good film for Welsh girls?
I really do.
Okay.
Yeah,
and I mean girls.
Yeah, definitely. It's very good for young women in the fact that the women in it are taking up their own space. They're hoeing their own row. The mother has brought up the girls on her own through choice. You know, she's not the struggling single mother that we are so bored of seeing in films. You know, there is actually kind of agency, and then they're not just reactive. You know, things are planned here. This is not a kind of half-witted wander through revenge. It's thought about. I'm not saying that obviously all girls should be murderous, but I would love to see more murderous women, frankly, because I'm very bored of seeing sort of murderous, violent men. Mm-hmm. And I love the way that Catherine Stewart handles the gun in this. It's a very kind of subtle point, but she's quite hardcore with that gun. Yeah. She's obviously not familiar with it, because why would she be?
Mm-hmm.
But she's not afraid of banging it into the side of a bloke's head. Not in a kind of gratuitous way, but just in a, I would like to do that. If I thought someone had murdered my mother, I'd do the same.
She's in Bang, so have you been watching Bang?
Yes, I if you have not heard me on Twitter banging on about Bang, I'd be surprised.
Wow.
I absolutely loved it.
So this is what we need, right?
Definitely.
Now, Bang is a TV show set in Port Talbot. I've only seen the first 3 episodes, but it's got guns in it.
Oh, watch all of them immediately.
It's got guns in it. It's got shagging in it. It's got drama. The screenwriter is not afraid to let dramatic things happen. And we need some more of this in Wales. And what I love about Llyfrgell is that it's the library suicide is not afraid to put a gun in a Welsh film set in Aberystwyth. Now, nobody's got guns in Aberystwyth. Don't get me wrong, I don't go there often. But
Have you not seen Hinterland?
But, well, let's not talk about that. But nobody's got guns in Aberystwyth. But they put one in the film because this is a movie. So this is about heightened reality, and it's not afraid to let dramatic things happen.
It's natural, but it's not naturalistic.
Exactly.
There's a difference. Yeah.
And it's got sex in it. It's got young people in it speaking Welsh, shagging and shooting each other. And it's like, yes, we need a bit of this. It modernises the...
I think it's about just being what modern Wales is rather than performing what Wales used to be.
Sure. You would think that this is, instead of the films we talked about today, this is where we should be going more so?
I actually have to say that if you kind of walked me through them all up until this point, I wouldn't be expecting anything this good to have come out at this point. I'm absolutely, sort of thrilled that it's as good as it is.
Cymraeg films, Welsh language films, don't have to pander to British audiences who basically only want to see Wales in that way that you're talking about, the twee.
The bonnets.
They want to see us as confused, leek chewing,
oh God,
valley dwellers.
Yes.
And Welsh language films doesn't have to do that. Now, Llyfrgell, for example, it's got so many good aspects to it, but also a film's supposed to be visual, and ideally you should be able to watch a film with sound off and know what's going on.
And you could
watch it and you could know what's going on, and that's one of its biggest strengths as far as I'm concerned. So what we're saying is, if anyone's listening and you're involved in writing films in Wales and producing them particularly, because you producers have got the power, more Llyfrgell, more Library Suicides, more Bang, and maybe less fictional South Wales villages with Cinderella complex.
We've got enough of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I love about this the fact that it subverts that kind of Cinderella thing entirely. It's more like an Angela Carter kind of fairy tale. Her mother, the mother dies, but things do not transpire in the same way as they do in all the other films when the mother is dead. It holds its own kind of vision very well.
What stuck out for me is a scene where the two sisters are talking about which one of them is going to take the guy.
Yeah. Which one of us he should be with. Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than...
which one's he going to pick?
Exactly.
He's not going to get the choice.
So surely that was... I'm glad that I was on the money there, because that stood out for me. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pat myself on the back there. Yeah. I'm clearly a feminist at heart. But no, I just remember watching that scene going, okay, this is unusual. Yeah. But yeah, I thought the film was top, so kudos to everyone involved. Unfortunately, much as I could sit here for all day and chat about this stuff, we have to call it a day pretty soon. So I'm going to mention a few films that we didn't have time to talk about, that hopefully, Kate, you can come back another time and have some more chats. And this is not going to be the first podcast on this topic. So when I was speaking to a lady called Angela Graham on the phone, who I've already given a shout out to, I'll just reiterate that shout out. So thanks, Angela, for your pep talk. And I realised just how broad this topic is, and we could do this for the next 3 or 4 years. Sorry, a representation of women in Wales. Yeah, behind the camera as well. So films we haven't looked at today, just a few of them. Now, there are more films in Wales than you'd realise, but ones we haven't looked at today, which have got prominent female characters, are Hunky Dory, House of America, Pride, even Patagonia, Kevin Allen's film The Circus, written by Helen Griffin. Human Traffic has got a few Cardiff-based female characters in it, and Solomon and Gaynor, Under Milk Wood by Kevin Allen also. So we've got lots of films that we haven't talked about today, which unfortunately we didn't have time for. All that remains is to ask you to listen, keep an eye out on the Twitter page, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel and lend this podcast your support. I'm going to give a shout out to my 2 kids, Yolo and Vito. Anyone you want to give a shout out to, Ange? Kate, sorry.
Just particularly to Rod for thinking that Twin Town is bleak. Bless you.
Okay. Rod, what are you on about, man? I'm going to finish off with with one final quotation from Our Lady Michelle Ryan, who says that I hope this new generation of filmmakers produce a Welsh cinema that can speak to us all. I look forward to when cinema expresses women's experience. Then I would have the same thrill of recognition that I see men relishing when they go and see one of the many films addressing their experience. Finally, we have to feel strongly that the future we want for our children, the communities we want to live in, the men we want to share our lives with, and the specific Welshness of that experience are all worth working and fighting for. And if it's worth that amount of effort, then it's also worth representing in our films.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for listening, and I'll see you soon. Ta-ra!
Ta-ra.
It's a good bet the Empire knows we're here.